Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Ohio State putting together quite a good recruiting weekend, landing four-star running back from the 2024 class in Jordan Lyle. But the guy we want to talk about the most comes from the transfer portal in Josh Simmons, transferring from San Diego State. You look at his recruitment out of high school, big-time offers, Georgia, Michigan, Oklahoma. A very sought-after kid stays home at San Diego State, hits the portal, and you heard Ryan Day kind of talk about we want to get some more competition and depth at that tackle position. You can consider that mission accomplished, bringing in a guy who started 13 games at right tackle for San Diego State. Now, going to talk a little bit about what Ohio State has done in the portal, how this roster and depth chart is looking like heading into 2023. But again, before we do, just want to say thank you to you guys. Over 5,000 subscribers on the channel. Absolutely awesome. We've been talking a lot of recruiting, a lot of stuff in the transfer portal, and the support you guys have shown truly means a lot. Even from the Ohio State fans, y'all have been very busy on the 2024 trail and in the transfer portal. So can't thank you guys enough. Dill, I'm going to kick this one off to you here. Josh Simmons providing some starting experience, which is something Ohio State does not have at the tackle position, and some serious talent.
And that's pretty much probably what I take away from this. Like, Ohio State hasn't recruited that offensive tackle position at a particularly high level compared to everything else.
They did in Paris Johnson Jr., and now he's gone.
And yeah, that's fair. Like, so what's on their board now? Tigris Shabola he was a very highly sought after prospect for sure. But some of the other guys are not, they weren't the like top 10 tackle in the country kind of names. And now again, and you're right to say, like, they have recruited the position well in a sense, but they have lost a lot of talent to the NFL. So it seemed like a logical fit to bring in a guy who's played a lot of football at this point, even though he's very young and probably the future is brighter than his past. But this was a move I think all Ohio State fans thought was going to happen if they could land it.
And this is a big one because when we watched that Ohio State spring game, got on, talked about where we like this team, where they could use some improvement. That tackle position was definitely a position we noted that needs to get better. Like, yeah, you have a new quarterback coming in. You have to be able to protect. And it's hard to evaluate the spring game because you're going up against JT, Jack Sawyer, like some really good edge rushers. But this Ohio State team is really complete in a lot of areas. That tackle position, both those tackle positions, seem to be one of those positions that Ohio State could use some reinforcements in. Talking about different positions they could attack in the transfer portal, that was the position that we both noted. Adding a guy like Josh Simmons, who started 13 games, has 3, maybe even 4 years of eligibility left, who has a ton of talent. Again, a two-way starter in high school, has played defensive line too. Very talented guy. I mean, you're seeing Ohio State not necessarily get a ton of names in the transfer portal because they recruit so well out of high school, keep guys in the program, but they are being selective. It's kind of the quality more than the quantity. And Joshua Simmons is a guy that is definitely a quality transfer coming in.
Yeah, and that's probably the thing is that I think these teams that are really rolling over that aren't like, I mean, the new coaches, new programs. Yeah, that makes sense that you bring in a lot of players, but I don't get the sense that's the way teams like Ohio State and Michigan and
Georgia, Bama, they don't need transfer portal guys.
And they shouldn't be building that way. It should be coming from the high school ranks and sticking with the program for 3-4 years and trying to go pro. And that's, to your point, Ohio State does not lose a ton of guys to the transfer portal, especially guys who play. And obviously there was talk this year, was Marvin Harrison going to go? He's not leaving Ohio State. Ohio State's as good of a program as there exists. And they don't lose guys like that.
No.
So that what they're doing, I think, makes a lot of. And I think on the other side, though, they shouldn't be like necessarily Clemson, where they refuse to take anyone. Ohio State can get better in the portal, and I think they have with a guy like Josh Simmons.
Well, you're seeing them take guys who are just making their. I mean, Tristan Gebbia was kind of a weird one because he's pretty much just a GA coming in and on scholarship, an experienced guy. But Jahad Carter, Davison Igmison is two guys that, I mean, were highly sought after.
And then you got a guy like Lorenzo Styles too. You add into the mix, and it seems like at this point he's going to play DB at Ohio State, another position that they definitely could use some depth and some competition, frankly, although it did look pretty good in the spring game, if we're being honest, especially Denzel Burke. But they're filling those positions they need. They've gotten a couple targets that they want, and it hasn't impacted high school recruiting at all. They're still recruiting as well as they ever have. So I think Ohio State's been doing a really good job in terms of how they're attacking. portal.
managing their roster, managing the personnel. It's kind of this is kind of a weird analogy, but I feel like it might work. Like when you're talking about your diet, like you use supplements to exactly supplement your diet, not eating necessarily like all supplements. The transfer portal, I'm going a little off the beaten path here, but the transfer portal kind of the same way. You use the transfer portal to kind of supplement your roster. You're not building your diet by like protein shakes. Same way you're not building a roster through the transfer portal unless you're a team like Lincoln Riley or Coach Prime where it's like you're depleted. You got nothing left. You got to get whatever nutrients you can get into your body, you're taking. A team like Ohio State that recruits so well from the high school class, they don't need to go to the portal to remake their roster. It's already a damn good roster. You see some cracks in the roster, that's where you kind of get a transfer portal guy in there. But you don't need to go out and get 15, 20 transfer portal dudes if you're Ohio State because you recruit and you have such a good depth chart from the high school ranks.
Yeah, and that's pretty much what they've done. And I certainly think it'll work. This move just feels like it's going to make them a lot better, a lot more complete. And I don't know that I wouldn't be surprised if they're not done. I kind of wonder if there'll still be.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Let's talk about where else they could go. So Lorenzo Styles is another guy you mentioned, and again, former wide receiver at Notre Dame, a 2021 guy, so he's young. A lot of buzz around him last year at this time as being the wide receiver one. He's probably not playing wide receiver at Ohio State because that is not a position of need in the slightest for Ohio State. Probably wouldn't even be in the 3 deep, quite frankly. But coming in, playing defensive back, he talked with Marcus Freeman at Notre Dame about where he could fit in. That's a nice addition. And again, a guy that probably needs a year to like understand that position, but the ball skills are there, the physicality and the athleticism is there. And then a guy that I'm kind of keeping my eye on, and this is more of a depth piece because you kind of like where you're at on the interior, Taiwan Malone, a guy from the 2021 class as well, a top 100 national recruit, had committed to Ole Miss, hitting the portal. He was on campus at Ohio State this weekend. He's another guy that I'm sure Ohio State would make a strong push on. And then again, a young guy who's got eligibility remaining at a position where they could add some depth.
And that's going to be interesting. I think they could add it in both trenches. I think if they took another interior defensive lineman, it absolutely would make a ton of sense. And they have good D linemen, but you look at it, they are a smaller bunch up there. Michael Hall, obviously, he's the star on that side of the ball. A smaller, more penetrating style defensive line play. Would it make sense to take a guy like Taiwan Malone to bulk up and be a little more heavy, especially when you go up and play a team like Michigan and frankly what Penn State's turning into, which they're recruiting really hard on that offensive line. They have really good running backs now. So you are going to need to deal with teams that want to hammer it. And yeah, Taiwan Malone would make perfect sense as a fit to complement all those athletes and those disruptors on what Ohio State.
And that's a position we talk a lot about. You can never really have enough depth on defensive line, like just rotating guys. And that's not a position that you're necessarily concerned about because I think Michael Hall is a dog, Tyleik Williams is a dog, Hiro Kanu was a guy that really caught my eye during the spring game. But again, if you have the ability to add a guy that was a top 60 player nationally out of high school who's from the 2021 class, so he's still only going to his third year, he's a green player, like that's a type of guy that's a quality transfer addition as opposed to just taking whoever's coming your way. Ohio State's kind of taking a step back and saying, okay, we want quality players coming into this program. Taiwan Malone would certainly represent a quality player coming into the program.
Yeah, and he'd make another position I wouldn't be stunned to see them do is add a real like a graduate offensive lineman. And I don't know it's hard to know who's going to end up being who's going to commit elsewhere, but because right now they're still awfully young, especially in terms of talent. Like
I think that's why Josh Simmons was so appealing to the Ohio State coaching staff. Is like you're trotting out 2 tackles that have no starting experience. Like DeJuan Jones and Paris Johnson were your bookend tackles. Not many people playing behind them. And so you want a guy that you at least know can play at the Power 5 level. And that's something that the transfer portal provides you is you're not really projecting. Like if this guy played solid football out in the Mountain West at San Diego State, he's going to be able to go and be a good starting tackle because the film from that 2022 season is him playing against other Power 5 college football programs. So you know he's going to transition pretty well, and he's a reliable guy to get in there at that tackle position.
Yeah, and that's exactly along the lines of what I would think is that if they added another, it certainly wouldn't surprise me. I don't know exactly what their roster management is and how many scholarships they have open, but I could imagine it just because, again, you are so thin in terms of experience.
And then the last thing we got to talk about, also Ohio State continuing. It almost doesn't even seem like a big deal at this point, but another kid from the 2024 class committing in Jordan Lyle. Again, that's 3 quality players that you're adding to your roster, one from the high school ranks, 2 young transfers. Again, Ohio State, not necessarily the flashiest weekend, but you're landing 2 really good guys from the transfer portal, a quality addition to the 2024 class, and then potentially Taiwan Malone as well. Ohio State getting better in the transfer portal, getting better from the high school class. Again, appreciate the support you guys have shown. If you do enjoy the content, lock in, subscribe to the channel. It's going to be a busy next couple of weeks and months as the 2024 class rolls on and the transfer portal comes to a close. Appreciate you guys supporting the channel. We'll talk to y'all later. Peace.